I have some leftover yarn from when I knit this sweater. Now, what can you do with leftover yarn? Let's knit a hat. Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Bas and several months ago I knitted this raglan sweater on my knitting machine. The sweater fits me really good, it's nice and warm and I just love it. I knitted it with some beautiful yarn I bought several years ago on a trip to Norway, and after I knitted the sweater I still had some yarn left over. Not much, but it's a shame to let it go to waste, so I stored it for later use. Now, what to do with it? And today I'm going to use it to knit a very cool matching hat in the same pattern as my sweater. Now, the great thing of using leftover yarn that you used for a previous project is that you already know all the important things. For the sweater project, I already decided on what knitting machine I wanted to use. I knitted the gauge swatches for the yarn, I washed it, looked how the yarn behaves, I already decided on the best stitch size for this yarn and so on. And I've written it all down. I didn't always do that, writing it down, but about a year ago I did start writing down and archiving all the basic information of every project I knitted. And this gives you so much information, especially if you want to knit something with leftover yarn. So this hat project should be a lot easier and faster. Now, let me get my binder and see what I wrote down. The binder. Okay. Sweaters, in Dutch it says truien. So, here it is. Including the punch card. Okay, first things first. The yarn. I used Tresco from Sandnes Garn and it's a wool nylon blend. And I remember it very well. A few years ago I was on a trip to Norway and I visited their factory store. And they had discontinued yarn, mislabeled yarn, leftovers, stuff like that for a bargain. So I bought it. For the contrast color I used Peer Gynt, also from Sandnes Garn, which is slightly thinner. But for this motif it worked out perfectly. Now onto the knitting machine. I see that I wrote down that I knitted it on the Brother 260. And that's this knitting machine, the Brother 260 bulky knitting machine. It's a metal flatbed knitting machine with a ribber. It has a needle spacing of 9 mm, which makes it suitable for the thicker yarns that a lot of hand knitters use. It's a punch card patterning system for knitting multicolor fabrics like Fair Isle. So I will knit my hat on this same machine. Now let me see, for the sweater I knitted several test swatches and I decided to knit a 1x1 rib on tension number 0. The stockinette stitch or the jersey stitch I knitted on tension number 3. And the Fair Isle part I wrote down that I knitted it on tension number 5. So 2 numbers higher than the normal jersey. And on these tensions I got these gauges. For the jersey 17.5 by 30. For the Fair Isle 17.5 by 26 rows. Now, that's good to know. So I'm going to use the same tensions for my hat. And already knowing this saves me a lot of time. And I also have the punch card I made. So I can reuse that for knitting the Fair Isle motif. Now onto the pattern for the hat. I have also written down several patterns for hats I knitted. So hats, in Dutch it says mutsen, so hats. And here are several hats I knitted. And this hat I did another video on my singer solo. I knitted this hat by hand, also by hand, and so I have several hat patterns. And I'm going to use this hat measurements because I really like the fit of this hat, saving me a lot of time. So I'm going to knit a hat that looks something like this, with ribbing. I'm also going to make a pom-pom on top. The color of the hat will be grey and I'm going to knit a Fair Isle motif. something like this. So to knit a hat like this, you basically just knit a rectangle with ribbing. I want my ribbing to be 6 centimeters high and the rest of my hat I want to be 16 centimeters. And I want the width of my hat to be 56 centimeters, so it sits nice and snug around my head. Now, I already know my gauge from when I knitted my sweater. So on a square of 10 by 10 centimeters, my gauge is 17.5 stitches. And since most of my hat is knitted in pattern, I'm going to use the gauge that I had for my Fair Isle, which is 26 rows. So with this gauge, I can calculate exactly how many stitches I need to cast on and how many rows I need to knit. So I'm going to cast on 98 stitches, then knit a 1 by 1 rib for 16 rows, and then continue to knit in pattern, in Fair Isle pattern, for 42 rows. So with keeping a binder with all the information from your previous projects, you can easily whip up a next project without too much fuss. First, I'm going to rewind my leftover yarn into new fresh yarn cakes for easy feeding through the machine. This is all a bit chaotic, so quickly rewinding them into nice yarn cakes. Yarn cakes are done. Now, let's get started knitting. So, it's just a basic rectangle and I need to cast on with 98 stitches. First, prepare the machine for knitting ribbing, so I am removing the sinker plate. And I'm replacing it with the connector arm. I'm taking my ribber carriage, moving my ribber up. Now my main carriage and my ribber carriage are connected. I'm going to knit with 98 needles. So that's 49 needles to the left side of 0 and 49 needles to the right side of 0. Same on the ribber bed. And I'm going to knit a 1 by 1 ribbing. So I'm placing half of my needles out of work. Same on the ribber. Now my needles go in between each other for a 1 by 1 rib. The ribber on the tightest tension, and that's even tighter than 0 on the star symbol. I'm going to set this lever to tightness 2. Main bed, tension 0. Take my thread, drop it in between the needle beds. And I like to blow so it falls down. I'm going to hang on to it with my left hand. And I'm going to hook the yarn into the connector arm, like so. And now I'm going to make my first zigzag row from right to left. I'm going to take my cast-on comb, remove the metal wire, push it in between the zigzag and reinsert the wire. Hang some weights on the cast-on comb. Now we're going to set the carriages for 2 rows of circular knitting, which equals 1 round. And I'm going to keep tension at 0 and I'm going to press the left part button, so the main carriage knits only to the right and doesn't knit to the left. And I'm going to push the right part button up, so the ribber carriage does not knit to the right and does knit to the left. So we create a circular knitting motion. And I'm going to increase the ribber tension to 0. Now knit 2 rows. 2 rows of circular knitting is done. Now I'm going to finish the cast on with just a normal knitting. So I'm pressing plain so the part button is released. I'm also going to release this part button and I'm going to set this lever to tension tightness 1. I'm keeping my tension on 0, and I'm going to finish the cast on. Cast on is complete. I'm going to reset my row counter. And I calculated that now I'm going to knit 16 rows of ribbing. But let me think, after the ribbing I want to continue directly in Fair Isle, and I need to make a selection row, so I need an extra row. So I want my carriage to end on the left. So I'm going to knit 17 rows of ribbing. Row 16, so one more row to go, and my final row of ribbing I like to knit at a higher tension, so the transition from ribbing to stockinette lays nice and flat, and in this case I'm going to increase to 4. Ribbing finished. Now I'm going to transfer all needles from the river bed to the main bed. So I'm going to take my double-eyed bodkin tool. I'm going to select all the main bed needles. All stitches have transferred from the river bed to the main bed. Lowering the river bed, removing the river carriage, removing the yarn, and unscrewing the connector arm and replacing it for the sinker plate. Now, placing the yarn back into the sinker plate, and now I'm all set up for single bed knitting. Now, for knitting with a punch card on this knitting machine there are 4 steps, and it's indicated on the machine. Step 1, this lever is on number 1, and I'm going to enter the punch card. And normally when you buy a punch card you start on row number 1, because that's where the motif starts. But I punched this myself and I want to start at row number 8. Step 2, I'm going to set this button to KC for knitting color. I'm going to keep my tension on 4. I can knit it either on 3 for stockinette, or I can already knit it on 5 for Fair Isle, but 4 is fine. It's just one row, it doesn't really matter. And now we're going to knit the selecting row. Now for the first row all the needles are selected. Step number 3, push the MC button for multicolor, and because we're going to knit multicolor, Fair Isle, I'm going to increase the tension to 5. Thread the second color yarn in slot B. Set the punch card to number 4. Now the punch card will advance with every row. Reset the row counter. And now it's quite easy. Now I can just continue knitting with 2 colors and changing color where needed, and knit 42 rows. And for every color change I'm not using any color changers, I'm just swapping out the yarns for another color. My Fair Isle motif is done, so now I'm going to remove the second yarn color, release the multicolor button, turn this knot back to normal knitting, and decrease my tension to 3. Now I'm all set up again for just plain stockinette knitting, just normal knitting. And I'm going to continue knitting. Okay, so I'm at row 38 and I have to knit up until row 42. So I've got 4 more rows to go. Now what I'm going to do next, I don't always do this because you can totally do without, but it does make for a bit less bulk at the top and it's just a little easier gathering the top of the head. So about 4 rows, or sometimes I also just do 2 rows, depending on the mood actually. Before the end, I am going to halve out the stitches for easier gathering. I take my 1-prong transfer tool and I am placing every other stitch on the stitch next to it. Like so. So this leaves me with half as many stitches. And because there now are half as many stitches and the gaps between the stitches are larger, I'm going to compensate by tightening the tension just a little bit, 2 tensions tighter to tension number 1. And now knit the final 4 rows. Now break the yarn, but I was extremely fortunate that this is the end of my yarn. So I made it exactly. I do have some other yarn, but this ball is perfectly finished. That's just lucky. So now I take my bodkin tool, double-eyed bodkin tool. I'm going to thread the yarn and I'm going to gather all the stitches. And here is the knitting fresh from the machine. Looks very cool already. So I basically got a rectangle now. All I have to do now is gather the crown of the head and sew it up the side seam with a mattress stitch. Gathering the crown is easy, just pull on the yarn end. If you want, you can run the yarn through the crown stitches a second time and make it extra secure. You can make it as secure as you want. Now, just slowly stitching the head together, 1 stitch at a time. And magically it is starting to look like a head. The mattress stitch makes for a very nice and neat finish. The head is all sewn together. Now it's time for the pom-pom. I've got a simple pom-pom maker and you can do whatever you want. This is what I've got left and I'm going to use all 4 colors together to make a mixed pom-pom. I take all the threads and wrap them around the pom-pom maker. And with this thicker yarn, making a pom-pom is really quick. The thicker the yarn, the faster the pom-pom is made. Now the yarn is wrapped and I'm going to cut all along the edge. Tie a knot around the pom-pom. Make it really secure. And here we have our pom-pom. Now neaten it up. I think this is a nice pom-pom. Final step, sew it onto the head. And the head is finished. And here is my finished head. It's perfect, exactly what I wanted, and it's matching with my sweater. And because I used leftover yarn from a previous project, I already knew all my important information like stitch size, like gauge, and therefore this was a really fun, quick and easy project. So next time you have some yarn left over from a project, think about what you can knit with it and just do it. And you can never have too many heads. Now I want to say a special thanks to my first channel member for supporting me. Your support helps me make more knitting machine videos, so thank you. I hope you liked this video. Please consider also supporting me by becoming a paid channel member. Several membership tiers are available. It also really helps to just leave a like on the video, write a comment down below, subscribe to my channel. Thanks. I wish you happy knitting and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!